When 70 loud strangers parked their shiny SUVs across my peaceful farmland, I thought it was a bad dream. But no, it was real. The infamous HOA Karen Sisters, known in the neighborhood for bullying everyone with their fake rules and loud mouths, had decided my private land was their perfect weekend campsite. Without asking, they dragged in tents, grills, and even a rented karaoke machine. My quiet Saturday morning turned into chaos, blaring music, shouting kids, and smoke choking the air from their barbecue. I warned them once, calmly. They laughed in my face. "Relax, farmer boy," one of them sneered. "You should be grateful we're bringing life to this boring land." That was their mistake. They didn't know my farm wasn't just soil and fences. It was a working property with irrigation systems, motion-triggered sprinklers, and a few harmless but unforgettable surprises. Within 9 minutes, their fun camping day turned into full-blown regret. Soggy tents, screaming guests, and a runaway portable grill were just the start. By the time they realized how wrong they were, the Karen sisters were soaked, embarrassed, and desperate to escape. I didn't lift a finger. My farm handled everything for me. Sometimes revenge doesn't need anger, just patience, a bit of planning, and a few well-timed sprinklers. They came for fun. They left humiliated, and I got my piece in a front-row seat to justice. Served farm-style. It was one of those golden mornings when everything felt right. The sun had just climbed over the eastern hills, washing my farmland in soft honey-colored light. Dew glistened on the grass, and the smell of freshly turned soil filled the air. I had been up since 5, feeding the hens, checking the irrigation system, and tightening a few loose fence posts near the west field. The only sounds were the rustle of leaves and the distant moo of my neighbor's cows. A peaceful, ordinary Saturday, or at least, it started that way. Around 10, as I took a sip of coffee from my thermos, I heard an unfamiliar rumble, deep, rolling, mechanical. At first I thought it was a tractor from the next property over, but the sound grew louder, multiplied, and soon the ground vibrated under my boots. I turned toward the dirt road that led to my property gate, and my stomach dropped. A convoy of shiny SUVs, minivans, and pickup trucks was rolling toward me, kicking up a trail of dust that shimmered in the sunlight. There had to be at least 15 vehicles, maybe more. The lead car, a silver Range Rover with pink decals, came to a stop right in front of my private property sign. The driver's door opened, and out stepped one of the most recognizable faces in town, Deborah Carson, one half of the notorious HOA Karen Sisters. The Carson sisters, Deborah and Donna, ran the local homeowners association in the nearby lakeside community, a fancy neighborhood full of oversized houses, fake smiles, and endless complaints. These two were the self-appointed queens of control. They fined people for leaving Christmas lights up too long. You've sent warning letters about non-regulation mailbox colors, and had once reported a man for parking his truck to blue for neighborhood aesthetics. So seeing them step onto my farmland, all smiles and sunglasses, was like watching storm clouds roll in over a sunny sky. Deborah strutted toward me in her spotless white sneakers, waving a clipboard like a badge of authority. "Good morning," she chirped in that tone people use when they're pretending to be friendly. "We're here for our community campout." "Excuse me?" I asked, blinking. She gestured behind her where people were already piling out of cars, kids, parents, grandparents, even a few dogs. Some were unloading tents, others carrying coolers, and one man was dragging a portable grill across the grass. Donna Carson, the other sister, emerged from a black SUV, wearing a sun hat big enough to block out the sun. "Yes, dear," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "We thought your open fields would be perfect for our event. It's nature-wide, but, you know, clean enough for our crowd." I wiped my hands on my jeans, trying to process the absurdity. "This is my farm," I said slowly. "You can't just show up here. This is private land." Deborah smiled, the kind of tight, artificial smile that doesn't reach the eyes. "Oh, we know. But we didn't think you'd mind. You've got all this space going to waste, and we're raising community spirit." I felt my pulse rising. "Did you even ask?" Donna scoffed. "Ask? Why would we need to? We're all part of the same town. Community means sharing, right?" I pointed at the sign, bold red letters reading "No trespassing." "That sign means something," I said firmly, but they didn't care. Behind them, the scene was turning chaotic. Kids were chasing each other through my cornrows, trampling young plants I'd just replanted the week before. Someone set up a folding table right in front of my barn, and another group started unloading firewood. One man even backed his trailer into my fence trying to get a better parking spot. I walked up to Deborah and Donna again. "You need to get everyone off my land. Now," I said, keeping my voice steady but firm. "This is not public property, and I don't allow." Deborah cut me off with a wave. "Oh, lighten up, Mr. Farmer. It's just for the weekend. We'll clean up after ourselves, promise." Donna added with a smirk. "You should be grateful we're bringing some life to this boring place. Look at all the happy families." I took a slow breath, staring at the swarm of people treating my fields like a public park. "You don't have permission," I repeated. Deborah rolled her eyes. "Oh, please. Nobody owns nature. You can't gatekeep fresh air." That line, that smug, careless line, almost made me laugh. These two women were unbelievable. I wanted to throw them off my property right then and there, but I could already tell how that would go. They'd scream, record videos, call the sheriff, and somehow twist the story into me attacking community members. I'd seen them pull this stunt before with other people, and it always ended in headaches. So, I swallowed my anger and turned back toward the barn, muttering, "Fine, do what you want. But don't say I didn't warn you." They didn't even hear me. Deborah was too busy organizing a tent layout while Donna handed out flyers for something called Lakeside Family Spirit Day. Within an hour, my peaceful farm looked like a carnival. Tents lined the edge of my field, grills smoked in the breeze, and a large portable speaker blasted pop music loud enough to scare every bird for miles. The smell of cheap barbecue sauce filled the air, mixing horribly with the scent of manure. People danced, shouted, and laughed, all while ignoring the property they were destroying under their feet. I watched as a group of teenagers climbed onto my hay bales for Instagram pictures. Another man parked his camper so close to my barn he blocked the entrance. And to top it off, one of the Karen's little lapdogs peed on my tool shed. I clenched my jaw, trying to stay calm. I'd spent years building this farm from the ground up, every fence, every patch of soil, every machine paid for with sweat and sleepless nights. And now, 70 strangers, led by 2 arrogant sisters, were trampling all over it like it was a playground. That's when something inside me clicked, not anger exactly, but resolve. These people thought I was powerless. They thought being loud and entitled gave them control, but they had no idea what kind of farm they'd chosen. Because my land wasn't just dirt and crops, it was a living system, wired with motion sensors, sprinklers, alarms, and more. I used technology to protect it from animals and thieves. But that day, I realized it could serve another purpose: poetic justice. As the Karens and their guests settled in for their camping day, I quietly walked back to my house. I didn't need to argue anymore. The farm would do the talking for me soon enough. And as I stood on my porch sipping what was left of my coffee, watching the self-proclaimed queens of the HOA laugh and shout across my fields, I couldn't help but smile. They had no idea what they'd started. By noon, the peace of my farm had vanished completely. The calm hum of bees and rustle of wheat had been replaced by loud laughter, clattering dishes, barking dogs, and bass-heavy pop songs that shook the windows of my farmhouse. What was once my sanctuary had turned into a noisy festival ground. From the porch, I could see tents stretching across my lower field, bright colors, cheap nylon, and glittery banners that read things like Lakeside Campout 2025 and Community Spirit is Life. They weren't camping for peace or fresh air. They were camping to show off. It was like a competition of who had the fanciest cooler, the biggest speaker, or the most expensive picnic set. I walked toward the crowd, hoping maybe foolishly that they'd at least keep things under control. But as I got closer, I realized that control was the last thing on anyone's mind. Kids were kicking soccer balls into my rows of newly planted corn, knocking over irrigation pipes I'd just set up the day before. A group of teenagers had dragged lawn chairs into the shallow pond by my orchard and were splashing around like it was a swimming pool. And then there were the Karens. Deborah and Donna were standing near a folding table covered in sandwiches and half-empty wine bottles, wearing matching pink sunglasses. They were in full event coordinator mode, shouting directions, organizing games, and pretending to care about safety. "Donna, we need another canopy over here," Deborah yelled, waving her clipboard like a general commanding troops. "And someone move that ugly tractor out of the background, it's ruining the photos." That ugly tractor was my grandfather's, older than I was, and still running strong. Hearing her call it ugly made my stomach twist. I walked over, keeping my tone polite. "Hey, you're getting too close to my irrigation zone. If those pipes break, it'll flood the lower patch." Deborah turned to me with her plastic smile. "Oh, don't worry about it. We'll be careful." "You're not being careful," I replied. "Kids are trampling through. Relax." Donna interrupted, laughing. "You're acting like it's the end of the world. It's just grass and dirt." Just grass and dirt. That was the moment I realized they didn't just disrespect me, they had no understanding of what it took to keep land alive. To them, it was just scenery, a background for selfies. I stepped back and watched them for a few moments. Deborah was now handing out flyers for something called Karen's Kindness Club, while Donna was recording a video, panning across the crowd and saying, "See, this is what community looks like when everyone comes together." Everyone except the person whose land they'd stolen for the day. By early afternoon, the chaos escalated. Someone started a small fire for roasting marshmallows right next to a stack of dry hay bales. I sprinted over and stomped it out before it could spread. They looked annoyed, like I was ruining their fun. "Dude, chill out," a teenager muttered as I poured water over the smoldering grass. "This isn't a park," I said sharply. "That's hay. It catches fire faster than you can blink." He rolled his eyes and walked away, earbuds in. Then came the noise. Someone hooked a Bluetooth speaker to a generator and turned the volume up until the ground vibrated. Pop songs, laughter, someone screaming through a karaoke mic. It was like a carnival in the middle of my farm. I walked back toward the farmhouse, rubbing my temples. My patience was thinning, but anger wouldn't fix anything. I'd already tried reasoning with them. Logic didn't work on people who thought rules were for everyone else. Inside the house, I sat down at my desk and glanced at the irrigation control panel, a tablet connected to the underground system that managed water flow across every section of the property. The system had 3 settings: low, medium, and flood mode. It was designed for heavy watering after drought periods, but when triggered, it could soak every square foot of the field in under 5 minutes. I didn't press it, not yet, but the idea began to take shape. For now, I decided to let them dig their own hole. The more they trashed my land, the easier it would be to justify what was coming. By mid-afternoon, the campout had turned into a full-blown circus. Someone had set up a karaoke station with a top roof. Kids were chasing my chickens with sticks, laughing as the birds scattered in panic. One of the Karen's dogs had gotten loose and was running through my vegetable garden, trampling rows of carrots and tomatoes. I stormed back outside. "Whose dog is that?" I shouted. Donna looked up from her folding chair, sipping lemonade. "Oh, that's Sparkles. She's harmless. She's destroying my crops." Donna shrugged. "It's just vegetables. You can grow more, can't you?" I clenched my fists, forcing myself not to yell. "You've got 1 hour," I said coldly. "After that, everyone leaves." Deborah laughed, waving me off. "You don't mean that? You're just cranky because you're not used to people having fun." I turned and walked away before I said something I'd regret. By the time I reached the barn, my fields looked like a battlefield. Trash was scattered everywhere. Plastic cups, wrappers, and empty soda cans littered the ground. Someone had even carved initials into the side of my tool shed. The smell of smoke and grease hung in the air. I leaned against the barn door, breathing hard. Every instinct in me screamed to throw them all out, to call the sheriff, to demand they leave. But deep down, I knew it would only cause more drama. The Karens were masters of twisting stories. If I shouted, they'd call it harassment. If I called the police, they'd cry about community oppression. No, I needed something smarter, something that would teach them respect, not through words, but through experience. And as if fate was giving me a sign, I heard the faint hiss-click of the sprinkler heads nearby, part of my automated system. A quiet smile tugged at the corner of my mouth. The sprinklers could cover that whole field in less than a minute, and the Karens had pitched their tents right in the center of the main irrigation zone. Still, I didn't act yet. I wanted them comfortable, confident. The more arrogant they got, the better it would feel when it all came crashing down. By sunset, the field looked like a small town fair, tents glowing with lanterns, smoke from grills rising into the orange sky, laughter echoing over the hills. Deborah and Donna posed for pictures in front of their setup, posting them online with captions like "bringing people together lakeside style." I watched from my porch as they bragged and strutted like they owned the place. I could hear Donna telling someone, "See, we didn't even need permission. Farmers are too uptight anyway." That was the final spark. I picked up the irrigation tablet, walked down to the field, and looked out at the crowd of trespassers. They were drinking, dancing, and shouting, completely unaware of what was about to happen. I didn't say a word. I just smiled, turned back toward my house, and whispered to myself, "Enjoy your last few minutes of sunshine, because tomorrow or maybe sooner they'd learn that you can't invade someone's home and call it a party, not without consequences." The next morning dawned bright and warm, sunlight spilling across the fields like liquid gold. Birds chirped from the fences, the sky was a clear blue, and a light breeze carried the scent of wildflowers. It should have been a perfect day on the farm, peaceful, quiet, and calm. But instead, it began with chaos. I woke up to shouting, loud, confused shouting. Through my bedroom window, I could see the Karen sisters and their crowd still camped out across my fields. Tents were scattered everywhere, and empty bottles glittered in the grass. They hadn't packed up like I hoped they would. If anything, they'd doubled down. Music was already blaring from one of the speakers, and someone was frying bacon on a makeshift grill, sending greasy smoke into the air. They had turned my land into a weekend resort. I sighed, threw on my hat, and headed out the door. I didn't want another confrontation, not yet. I wanted them to feel comfortable. I wanted them relaxed, smug, and sure that they'd gotten away with it. Because once that switch flipped, there would be no undoing what came next. From the edge of the field, I watched the mayhem unfold. Kids ran barefoot through puddles they'd made by spilling cooler water. A man with a Bluetooth speaker was setting up for karaoke round 2. Deborah was filming herself again, holding her phone high and smiling into the camera. "Day 2 of the lakeside campout," she chirped. "So grateful for this beautiful farm and the kind farmer who let us enjoy nature." I almost laughed out loud, if only she knew what was about to happen. Donna strutted past a group of campers, clapping her hands. "Everyone, remember, the group photo will be at noon by the tractor. Let's make it Instagram-worthy." I turned on my heel and walked back toward the barn, suppressing a grin. My irrigation system's control panel sat inside a simple touchscreen tablet with access to every sprinkler, valve, and pump across the property. I'd spent years perfecting that system. It wasn't just functional, it was precise. I could soak a single corner of the field or drench the whole area at once. And today, that precision was about to make the HOA Karens very, very sorry. I ran my fingers over the tablet, bringing up the map of the lower field. A grid of blue dots represented the sprinkler zones. The campers had set up their tents right in the heart of Zone 3, the most powerful section. Each sprinkler head could launch a jet of water 20 feet into the air. I hesitated for just a second. Then I remembered the trampled corn, the broken pipes, the carved shed, and the smug laughter from yesterday. "All right," I muttered. "Let's water the crops." I tapped the full pressure button. The sound started faintly. A soft hiss, then a click, then another. In the distance, the sprinkler heads began to rise from the soil, popping up one by one like sentries preparing for battle. Then, without warning, the first jet of water burst through the air. A perfect arc of cold water slammed into the middle of the campsite. Screams erupted instantly. "AHHH, what the? Turn it off. Who turned on the sprinklers?" Before anyone could react, the second and third zones activated. Water exploded from every direction, soaking tents, food, clothes, and people in seconds. The neat rows of lawn chairs became rivers of mud. The grill hissed and sputtered as smoke turned to steam. Children ran in every direction, shrieking and slipping on the wet ground. Deborah stood frozen, her hair plastered to her face, mascara streaking down her cheeks. "Make IT stop," she screamed, waving her arms helplessly. Donna, meanwhile, was trying to cover her phone with a towel. My camera's ruined," she shrieked, tripping over a tent rope and landing face first in the mud. The scene was pure chaos, a storm of shrieking, slipping, and sputtering people. Every second, the sprinklers rotated, sending fresh waves of water in new directions. And then came the mud. The once dry field turned slick within minutes. Shoes sank, tents collapsed, and tables toppled. The Karen's carefully decorated campout zone looked like a disaster site. One man tried to save the food cooler, only for it to tip and spill sandwiches into a puddle. From my porch, I watched it all with a straight face, though, I'll admit, a grin tugged at the corner of my mouth. I'd never seen anything quite so satisfying. Deborah ran toward my fence, drenched and fuming. "You did this on purpose," she shouted. I called back calmly. "It's my irrigation schedule. The crops need water." "This is not a farm schedule," she yelled, her voice cracking. "You're attacking us." I shrugged. "I warned you not to camp there. You'll regret this," she screamed, pointing a trembling finger at me. "We'll call the police." "Please do," I said, leaning casually against the fence post. "Tell them how you broke onto private land for a party." Her mouth opened and closed like a fish, but no words came out. Behind her the chaos continued, tents collapsing, speakers shorting out, and people slipping face first into mud. One woman tried to drive her SUV out early, but the tires spun in the wet ground, splattering mud everywhere. A group of men tried to push it free, only to get coated from head to toe in brown sludge. By now, most of the campers were scrambling to gather their things, stuffing soggy clothes and half-ruined gear into cars. The dogs barked wildly, shaking water off their fur. Someone tripped over a hose, yanking it loose, and the stream of water blasted directly into a tent, sending it flying. The Karens shouted orders, but nobody listened. Their authority evaporated the moment the sprinklers turned on. After about 10 minutes I turned off the system. The water pressure hissed, sputtered, and fell silent. The field was soaked, the air thick with the smell of mud and wet grass. The once cheerful campers now looked like drowned rats, mascara streaks, ruined clothes, and dripping hair everywhere. Deborah stomped up to the fence again, her sneakers squishing with every step. "You'll be hearing from our lawyer," she snapped. I tilted my head. "Can't wait." Donna staggered beside her, shivering. "This was supposed to be a family event. You've ruined it." I met her glare evenly. "You ruined it the moment you trespassed." For a moment they just stood there, seething, drenched, humiliated. Then, finally, they turned and trudged back toward their group. One by one, the campers packed up what was left of their gear. Engines started, tires spun in the mud, and soon the convoy of cars began retreating down the road, leaving deep ruts in the once smooth path. When the last car disappeared behind the trees, silence finally returned. The air felt fresher somehow, cleaner, as if the land itself was relieved. I walked through the empty field, my boots squelching in the wet ground. Empty cups, torn tops, and broken chairs were all that remained. I bent down, picked up a soaked flyer from the mud, and read the smeared words, "Karen's Kindness Club, building community, one event at a time." I laughed under my breath and tossed it aside. The sun broke through the clouds then, shining across the glistening field. The birds returned, chirping from the fence posts, and for the first time in 2 days, my farm felt alive again, not with noise, but with peace. The HOA Karens had come to my land thinking they could control it, but out here, nature doesn't take orders, it gives them, and my farm had spoken loud and clear. By the time the last of the SUVs disappeared down the dirt road, the farm looked like a war zone. Torn tents hung from fence posts like surrender flags. Mud streaked across every inch of the field, and the one-screen grass was now a patchwork of brown puddles and flattened chaos. A broken cooler floated lazily in one of the irrigation ditches, and half-eaten sandwiches lay scattered like battlefield debris. The silence that followed their departure was thick, the kind of silence that almost hums, like the land itself was sighing in relief. I leaned against my fence and took it all in. My boots sank slightly in the damp soil as the sun beat down on the steaming ground. It wasn't pretty, but it was peaceful. For the first time in 48 hours, there was no shouting, no laughter, no booming music, just the sound of wind, birds, and the faint gurgle of the irrigation system finishing its cycle. I walked into the field slowly, surveying the damage. My crops near the edge were trampled, the stalks bent and bruised. The picnic tables they had dragged over were overturned, one of them split in half. I found tire marks leading straight across the lower patch of my garden. They had driven over it, trying to escape the mud, leaving behind deep ruts that would take weeks to flatten. But even with all that mess, I couldn't help but smirk, because they hadn't gotten away with it. For once, the Karens hadn't won. As I made my way toward the barn, I heard the crunch of tires again, one lone car returning. My shoulders tensed. The silver Range Rover came into view, its chrome coated with dried mud. The door opened, and out stepped Deborah Carson, still looking furious. Though her hair had been blow-dried into submission, she was wearing a clean blouse and big sunglasses, pretending like the last 24 hours hadn't happened. She marched straight toward me, heels clicking on the gravel. "We need to talk," she said sharply. I folded my arms. "About what?" "Trespassing, littering, destruction of property." She ignored the jab and pulled out her phone. "About what you did," she snapped. "That sprinkler stunt was dangerous. You humiliated 70 people, including children. We could have been hurt." I raised an eyebrow. "You were trespassing, Deborah. I didn't humiliate anyone. You did that yourselves. You can't just turn on industrial sprinklers like that," she shouted. "That's assault." I laughed, a low, genuine laugh that made her flinch. "Assault? You broke onto private land, refused to leave, and destroyed my property. If I'd called the sheriff, you'd be facing real charges." Her lips tightened. "We'll see about that. My sister and I have already contacted our attorney. You'll be getting a notice soon." "Great," I said. "Tell your lawyer to bring a mop, too. There's plenty of cleanup to do." Her nostrils flared. "You think this is funny?" "I think karma has a sense of humor," I said simply. For a second, she just stood there, trembling with anger. Then she pointed her manicured finger at me. "You're going to regret this, Mr. Whatever your name is. People talk in this town. You'll lose business. Nobody will support a man who attacks families." I smiled faintly. "Funny thing about that, I don't run a tourist farm. I don't need your approval. And I sure don't need the kind of families that destroy everything they touch." She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Finally, she let out a huff, turned sharply on her heel, and stomped back to her car. As she slammed the door, a splash of mud from her tires coated her shiny bumper. She sped off without looking back, her fancy SUV fishtailing down the wet road. I exhaled slowly, letting the tension drain out of me. It wasn't over, I knew that. The HOA Karens never accepted defeat quietly. There would be gossip, threats, maybe even a visit from the police. But none of that worried me. I had evidence video from the security cameras, photos of the damage, and even recordings of their insults. The truth was on my side. The rest of the day was spent cleaning. I collected trash into piles, dragging broken chairs and soggy blankets toward the dump trailer. The ground squelched beneath my boots as I picked up bits of plastic and wet paper plates. Every so often, I found something absurd: a sequined sandal, a half-empty wine bottle, even a gold-plated Karen's Kindness Club badge. I pocketed that one as a trophy. By afternoon, the sun had dried most of the field, and the smell of wet earth faded to the familiar scent of grass and hay. A few neighbors stopped by, drawn by the noise and the gossip. "Hey, I saw those cars flying down the road this morning," said Hank, my neighbor from 2 miles down. "What happened?" "It looked like a tornado hit your place." "Close enough," I said with a chuckle. "More like a self-inflicted storm," he laughed, shaking his head. "Heard it was those HOA women from Lakeside. You finally gave them a taste of their own medicine, huh?" I shrugged. "Let's just say the sprinklers did what words couldn't." He grinned. "Good for you. They've been bossing everyone around for years. About time someone stood up to them." Word spread quickly. By evening, I started getting texts from friends in town, people thanking me for finally shutting the Karens down. Someone even posted a video clip from the chaos, a shaky recording of the drenched campers slipping and screaming as sprinklers blasted them from all sides. The caption read, "Justice served country style." It went viral in the local community page within hours. Meanwhile, Deborah and Donna tried to defend themselves online, claiming I'd attacked innocent families, but the comments didn't go their way. People pointed out the no trespassing signs in the background, the tents on private property, and their smug expressions from the day before. Their attempt at damage control only made things worse. By sunset, the Karens had gone silent. I sat on the porch that evening, a cold drink in hand, watching the orange light spread across the hills. The land was quiet again, peaceful, alive, and free from their arrogance. I could hear frogs croaking near the pond, and the gentle hum of crickets in the grass. My dogs lay at my feet, their tails thumping lazily. The air felt different now, lighter somehow. Maybe it was the satisfaction of seeing justice play out naturally, or maybe it was simply knowing that peace had returned to where it belonged. Either way, I couldn't help but smile. I looked out over the fields, muddy, messy, and beautiful. Nature had a way of humbling people who thought they were untouchable. The Karen sisters had strutted onto my land like they owned it. But out here, the land doesn't bend to arrogance. It bends to respect. As the last bit of sunlight dipped behind the hills, I whispered softly to myself, "That's one lesson they won't forget." And deep down, I knew they wouldn't. A week passed after the chaos on my farm, and life finally began to return to normal. The air smelled clean again, just earth, hay, and sunlight. Birds nested in the trees near the barn. My crops began to recover, and for the first time in what felt like forever, I could hear the sound of silence. It wasn't just the absence of noise, it was the sound of peace reclaiming its space. The damage, though, still told the story. Deep tire tracks cut across my soil, the grass near the pond was slow to grow back, and a few fences still leaned from where campers had hung lanterns and decorations. But every bit of that mess was a reminder of what happens when arrogance meets boundaries. Each morning, as I repaired the land, I found myself smiling, because while they had left a physical mess, I knew they carried home something much heavier: humiliation and a lesson they'd never forget. 3 days after the sprinklers incident, a deputy from the county sheriff's office came by. His cruiser crunched down my gravel drive, stopping near the barn. He stepped out, removing his sunglasses, a polite smile on his weathered face. "Mornin', sir," he said. "Mind if I ask about what happened last weekend? We got a complaint from a couple of folks in the lakeside community." I nodded. "Deborah and Donna Carson, right?" He chuckled under his breath. "You guessed it." I motioned toward my porch. "You want some coffee while we talk?" He accepted, and we sat under the shade of the old oak tree while I explained everything from the moment they arrived uninvited to the sprinkler storm that sent them running. I showed him my security footage. Every second was there in perfect clarity. The trespassing, the damage, the defiance, and finally, the water. When the video ended, the deputy leaned back, chuckling softly. "Well, he said. "Looks to me like you handled that cleaner than most would have. No laws broken on your end, just a bunch of entitled folks getting what they asked for." I shrugged. I figured calling the law would just drag things out. The land handled it better than I ever could. He smiled, tipping his hat. "I'll file this as a closed case. You won't hear from them again, at least not legally." He was right about that, but the story didn't end there. That night, my phone buzzed with notifications. The viral video, the one someone had filmed during the sprinkler chaos, had spread beyond our little town. People across the country were sharing it, laughing, commenting, and even making memes about the Karen campout flood. News outlets picked it up, labeling it farmers versus HOS. The day karma rained down, the comments section was pure gold. People cheered for the farmer who stood his ground, calling it poetic justice and nature's revenge. A few even said it restored their faith in fairness. For once, the whole world seemed to agree the Karens had finally met their match. As for Deborah and Donna, they vanished from public view. They deleted their Karen's Kindness Club pages, canceled all their upcoming community events, and were rarely seen outside their pristine lakeside homes. Word around town was that the HOA board forced them to step down after the scandal. Turns out, being the laughingstock of the internet doesn't mix well with pretending to be a moral authority. One afternoon, about a week later, I ran into Donna at the local grocery store. She was quieter, subdued, a different woman from the one who had strutted onto my land like a queen. Our eyes met near the produce aisle. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then, she sighed, adjusting her sunglasses. "We shouldn't have come," she said quietly. "You were right." I nodded slowly. "You learned the hard way. I hope you don't forget it." She hesitated, then gave a faint, almost embarrassed smile. "Believe me, I won't." And then she walked away, leaving behind a silence heavier than any apology. From that day on, things changed not just for me, but for the whole community. People who had once been afraid of the HOA's control began standing up for themselves. A neighbor named Tim told me he refused to pay one of their ridiculous lawn color violation fines, citing my story as inspiration. Another woman, Marcy, started a petition to replace the HOA leadership entirely. It seemed my little farm fiasco had sparked something bigger, a quiet rebellion against petty power. As for me, I went back to my routine, fixing fences, tending to the animals, planting new crops. But every time I walked past the lower field, I couldn't help but picture that day: 70 entitled people, running in circles under a storm of sprinklers, covered in mud and regret. It was a scene I'd never forget, not because of the chaos, but because it reminded me that boundaries matter whether they're made of wood, wire, or plain respect. A few weeks later, I got a letter in the mail. It was from Deborah. Inside was a short note written in neat handwriting. "We apologize for what happened. You didn't deserve that. We hope you'll accept our apology. Deborah and Donna Carson." No excuses, no justifications, just a rare bit of humility. I didn't need to respond. The land already had. The next morning, I walked out onto my porch with a cup of coffee. The sun was rising over the hills, painting the sky pink and gold. My field stretched out in front of me, green and alive again. The sprinklers clicked quietly in the distance, releasing a fine mist that glittered in the morning light. For a long moment, I just stood there, breathing it all into peace, the quiet, the feeling of justice balanced by nature itself. They say karma always finds its way. I used to think that was just a saying, but now, I knew better. Sometimes, karma doesn't come from people, it comes from the earth beneath your feet. That day, as the sun climbed higher, I tipped my hat to the land and whispered with a grin, "Good job, partner." Because in the end, it wasn't me who taught them the lesson, it was the farm itself. They came uninvited, they disrespected what they didn't understand, and in less than 10 minutes, they faced a truth they couldn't argue with. You can't bully the land, and you can't out-talk karma. And as far as I was concerned, justice had been served, soaked, muddy, and unforgettable.